Right, so Rishi Sunak, we know he's not interested in climate change. There's no profit in it for him, is there? As I've mentioned in other videos, he recently lost a minister in Zach Goldsmith over this issue of him not being interested in the environment. But one thing we all know Sunak is interested in is both a desperate need for positive headlines right now and also money. Though given his failure to tackle inflation and grow the economy as per his own personal pledges, it's not exactly cash for the country that floats his boat, but lining his own pockets as ever. And the story of Sunak and these new oil and gas licenses is all about not caring about the environment, winning a positive headline, and also might just be another example of him lining his own pockets too. So stick with me, and I'll explain all. So the story is that as the world accepts in principle, even if it's rather slow to act in practice, we need to get away from our addiction to fossil fuels, from oil and gas, that it is bad for climate change and the environment. Sunak has just ignored the issue completely. Now, I grew up knowing about global warming. We used to see this sort of thing on the TV, on the news, knowing about what damage we've done, the CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons. I love that word. I don't know why I've always remembered it. From fridges, as they used to be back in the day, the hole in the ozone layer, as for instances of climatic news going on in the 80s when I was growing up. And I figure everyone of my generation, and younger at least, surely, not exclusively so, obviously, but we grew up with this stuff on the news, have some conscious idea that we needed to move away from this as we were growing up, as part of our upbringing. And I'm only 2 years older than Sunak, so therefore surely he did too. So I can only conclude that a combination of private education and obsession with money and Tory leanings really does warp the mind when you can knowingly and willfully construct policy in this way, knowing that it's harmful to the planet. How much of a bubble was this guy raised in if he didn't? Because it can't be he's not being told. As I said at the start, the minister recently quit on him over this. So it all comes down to having a prime minister that basically does not care if the world burns, as long as he gets a good headline in a few papers for a couple of days, and maybe cashes in personally as well. Because when does he ever do anything, it seems, unless he's on the make at the same time? He's actually said on TV, without a flicker of irony crossing his brow, that even when we reach net zero by 2050, and a quarter of our energy needs will still be coming from oil and gas. Well, how are you going to square that then? How are you going to manage that when still burning fossil fuels? Oh, with technology that doesn't exist yet, of course. Oh, obviously. How could I be so silly as to not think up imaginative technology as the obvious conclusion? Carbon capture technology is what he's bleating about, that will apparently capture methane and carbon dioxide gas emissions from their point of emission, or draw them directly from the air, no less. It can then be used in other products or buried deep underground and forgotten about. That's the theory. And that is all it is, theory. Sunak thinks it's the answer to everything. He can grant these licenses for oil and gas, keep on blasting these pollutants into the air, and, well, we can fix that problem later with new technology. These will create jobs. The money raised can be used to invest in renewable future sources that he's not interested in. And jobs would also be created when this mythical carbon capture project begins. 2 storage facilities for which are being planned in Scotland, which made me laugh when I recall a lot of our heating bill problems over the last year or so arose from the Tories scrapping gas storage facilities previously. We couldn't store the stuff. He's granting licenses for new gas exploration. Well, where are you going to put it when it starts coming in then, when the scrap facilities are still not back online? Carbon capture is considered a pipe dream by some in the know. It's cheaper and easier to just reduce usage, reduce consumption, and switch to other sources now. There's no need to do any of what Sunak is currently doing. It takes 5 years on average these days from finding new oil and gas fields to extracting it and becoming economically viable in doing so, because it is a finite resource, it is running out, and therefore it is getting harder to find and more expensive to find. For comparison, it takes just 6 months to bring a new wind farm online, start to finish, and it's 11 times cheaper to produce, and will only become more and more cheaper the harder it is to find new oil and gas. It is absolutely mind-numbingly stupid to do what Sunak is doing. But then he's not the only one being mind-numbingly stupid over this. You have to be pretty darn stupid to have made an energy policy whereby you say there will be no more oil and gas licenses granted by your future government, but that equally you have no intention of revoking any license the current government may put into place before you achieve power. But that's exactly what Keir Starmer has done. That is what official Labour policy on energy going into the next election is. Mr. I don't want to offer hope or change is definitely meeting those criteria, if nothing else. What he has basically done is been so stupid, he's given Sunak the green light to do all of what he is doing now, or grant all of these licenses, because he won't revoke any of them. And that's because the investors in oil and gas apparently need certainty, not the rest of us who apparently don't necessarily need a planet to live on quite as much, or whilst we're at it, kids who need food, eh, Sir Kid Starver? Investors before kids, there's a slogan for it, isn't there? Greed is their god, blue Tory or red Tory alike. Both parties are led by short-sighted fools, but where you expect that from the Tories? It should be a massive source of embarrassment for Labour. But of course, there is no such thing as a Labour Party anymore. Anyone worth their salt has gone or been purged, and all that's left is people holding their hands out trying to pinch donors from the Conservatives by trying to out-Tory them. So why should we be surprised when their policy doesn't change a thing from what is happening now? Of course, it makes for good headlines in the right-wing hate rags of this country, though. The Tory graph has cheered this move whilst ridiculing Labour for being opposed to new licences, but not opposing the ones the Tories are issuing. An open goal, they haven't missed it. City AM has reported that a green investing Australian billionaire in the mining business, who has invested heavily here, will quit the UK and take all of his money with him if this all goes ahead. And the comic that passes for a newspaper called the Daily Express has gone in on all the new jobs being created. You know the crack by now. Sunak is flavour of the month amongst the favourite news outlets of red-faced frothy types, which is precisely what he wanted from this. Then we come to Sunak's real incentive. Because despite the fact he's one of the wealthiest people in the country already, on the Times rich list as he is, as is always the case with the rich, they can never have enough, can they? It's why they can never make decent and fair leaders, because they're in it for themselves. So his incentives, well, who wants a gas or oil drilling licence then? Well, oil and gas companies, of course, obviously. Who counts one of the largest oil and gas producing companies on the planet amongst its client base, though? Well, that would be a certain India-based IT company called Infosys. Back in July of last year, Byline Times, those currently leading the investigations and allegations against Dan Wootton, covered the fact that all four of the then frontrunners to replace Boris Johnson as Prime Minister had ties to the fossil fuel industry. So it should surprise nobody that the Tories are still so adamantly pro-oil and gas. In Sunak's case, as is so often proven to be the case, his ties are through his wife's firm, Infosys, through her shares that she has in that firm, she has a 0.93% stake in that company, which, although sounds quite small, actually sees her get an annual return of some £11.5 million. Now, on one hand, oil and gas supply and exploration in Russia has been a connection I've spoken about regarding Sunak before. Is he still benefiting from Russian money via his wife's dividends? Has Infosys finally withdrawn from Russia yet, after promising time and again now to do so? We still don't know with any certainty, so he could still be benefiting from Russian business dealings personally. But aside from that, one of Infosys' key clients in oil and gas that we know about is Shell, who would be one such company bidding for new North Sea drilling licenses. In fact, according to an Infosys brochure on oil and gas practice, because they literally produce such a thing, they partner with 2 of the top 5 integrated oil and gas companies, 3 of the 4 top oil field services providers, and 5 of the top 10 independent upstream enterprises across the oil and gas landscape. So that's a lot of investment in oil and gas then. In the case of Shell, though, we know that they are the 9th largest corporate producers of greenhouse gases from 1998 to 2015, and that prior to COP26, Shell lobbyists had met with the Tory government no fewer than 44 times. It was said then, when this Byline article came out, that should Sunak win the Prime Ministership, which he did finally after Liz the Lettuce Truss came and went, would represent a win for the oil and gas industry, and so it is coming to pass. Infosys have, incidentally, in the last 2 months, so since the Byline article, signed a massive $1.5 billion deal with BP now, adding another oil and gas name to their resume and another oil and gas related income for the Sunaks, potentially via those Infosys shares, because of course they're going to be bidding for drilling licenses as well. The conflict of interest is screaming out yet again, but our pathetic mainstream media are, as usual, silent on this glaring little detail. The planet can burn as long as this man's income personally grows. We cannot afford, and neither can the planet afford, any more government leaders who won't change tack and start putting planet and people before themselves. Thanks for watching. I hope you found the video useful. Please like, share and subscribe if you did. More content out daily. Meanwhile, here's a video recommendation for you where Infosys business dealings in Russia aren't the only Sunak link to Putin's regime, as his appointment of a new Tory senior party treasurer at the start of the year, and leading to the biggest donation their party has had in the last 20 years, coincidentally, will attest to. And I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.